As a probe into the ferry disaster deepens, more figures are being linked to the millionaire de facto owner of the Chonghaejin Marine Company, including the maritime police. Moving up the ladder and moving up fast, the North Korean leader's confidant Hwang Byung-seo wins yet another high-ranking regime title after making vice marshal just 2 weeks ago. And Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is drawing a clear line between his country and Germany when it comes to apologizing for wartime atrocities. Welcome to the newscast. I am Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. It's been 16 days since the tragic Sewol-ho ferry accident has shocked the country and the rest of the world, and the confirmed death toll now stands at 219, with 83 people, mostly teenagers, still missing. Now, as for the latest, we go live to Kim Ji-yeon, who is standing by for us at the news center. Ji-yeon, let's start with the investigation where more arrests were made today.
That's right, Sherry. Local authorities arrested 2 senior employees of Chonghaejin Marine Company on Thursday for negligence. They stand accused of allowing the ferry to be renovated so it could hold more cargo, knowing very well that it was dangerous. The excess cargo and weight on board the ferry is seen as one of the main reasons for the sinking. The authorities are planning to request an arrest warrant for the 2 employees, identified only by their surnames An and Kim. And the director of the company is also suspected of embezzling funds of around $29,000 while in charge of restructuring the ferry.
Top of that, the joint investigation team says that it detected a problem in the process of fastening cargo inside the ferry, right, Ji-yeon?
That's right. The turnbuckle device, which was used, which has wires to fix the cargo into place, was found not being used. And it was also found that only ropes and a device called the cone were being used, but were not able to safely secure the cargo on board. Back to you, Sherry.
Now, we know the investigation has further zeroed in on the owners of the ferry company. What's the latest on that?
Well, Sherry, a search and seizure was conducted at around 10 company affiliates and private houses in connection to the practical owner of the ferry operator, Yoo Byung-on, on Thursday. Yoo's family members, including his brother-in-law, have been notified to appear before prosecutors by Friday, which is less than 14 hours from now. Also, an arrest warrant was requested for a key figure linked to Yoo, Song Guk-bin, the CEO of a cosmetics company called The Panda, for reportedly embezzling funds worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Song was questioned earlier yesterday for 14 hours by prosecutors.
And there was yet another surprising connection to this case, this time between the Yoo Byung-on and an investigating official.
You're right. The National Maritime Police Agency says that it has replaced Lee Yong-uk as the director of the Korea Coast Guard's Police Investigation Unit after it was found that Lee was employed by a company owned by Yoo, and Lee was working for Sewol Marine Shipbuilding Company for 6 years in the 1990s after joining Yoo's religious group. Lee has been taken off the Sewol-ho ferry case in light of what is viewed as a conflict of interest, although he says he had broken off all contact with Sewol Marine and when he joined the Coast Guard.
And unfortunately, the shipping company is not the only one under fire for lax management, is it?
No, it wasn't. The rescue team that first arrived at the ferry site on April 16th is under fire again after new information revealed that it shows that they were slow when they were handling the situation. It took the Mokpo Coast Guard more than 20 minutes to depart for the ferry site after being dispatched. The order was sent at around 8:58 a.m., but they didn't leave until 9:20 a.m. 22 minutes later. Faced with the criticism, the Korea Coast Guard downplayed the delay and said that it was within their standards. They also said that the rescue officials were untangling electrical lines that were connected to the rescue boat that they're using to turn on the engine. Normally, it takes rescue teams a few minutes to depart from their stations and head to the accident site. And critics also say that the rescue team should have been adequately trained and prepared to handle emergencies like the Sewol-ho ferry, especially when navigating in the waters notorious for these strong sea currents.
I see. Now, before I let you go, do tell us about how the search operations are going at this point.
Well, they have found several more bodies inside the vessel Thursday, and authorities say they expect to make more progress in their search starting Friday. They believe that they'll finally be able to get inside cabins that have been blocked by debris. But besides from that, decision was made to no longer deploy a diving bell at the accident site. The effectiveness of the device was put into question during the past several days now. It was deployed yesterday and earlier today in hopes that it would help divers stay underwater longer during their searches. But it was pulled out after 1 or 2 hours due to the strong currents. Some say precious time has been wasted on the diving bell. And one of the family members of the missing argued that search operations on the vessel was stalled for 4 days because of it. I'm Kim Ji-yeon, and I'll bring more updates later this evening.
Thank you very much. And as we can all imagine, the unbearable weight for the families of the missing continues on Chindo. And now a group of people who have gone through a similar experience are with them to show their support. Kwon So-ah has this story.
A group who knows as well as anyone the pain of having lost a family member in a ship disaster arrived on Jindu Island Wednesday afternoon to help the people who continue to wait for word of their loved ones who were aboard the Sewol-ho ferry. The new group of volunteers is made up of family members of the victims who lost their lives when the South Korean warship Cheonan sunk on March 26, 2010. 46 people tragically lost their lives that day. Around 30 of their family members went to Jindu to stay with the families at Paekmokgang Harbor and Jindu Indoor Auditorium. The people there waiting for word on the missing have been there for more than 2 weeks now and don't have much physical or mental strength left. The family members of the Cheonan victims said they want to pay back the help they received from other volunteers 4 years ago. They added that they are being careful not to draw attention to themselves, that they just want to provide help in any way they can. That includes doing the laundry, cleaning up, and serving food, among other tasks. They have also expressed their sorrow and frustration about the Sewol-ho tragedy.
I would have never thought that so many young students would die. And at this moment, I'm just sad. Why do these tragic incidents keep occurring? I hope this kind of tragedy never happens again.
Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And in the wake of the disaster, the Korean government says it's investing more now on investing a more centralized disaster response system and boosting emergency training. President Park Geun-hye asked all ministries to make sure manuals that contain emergency response procedures are in place and those in charge are well informed and properly trained. While recognizing the need to spend more on welfare, the president also talked about maintaining the country's financial soundness through a so-called pay-go policy so that expenditures are paid for with funds that are already available. Overall spending would be further reduced by merging some 600 projects that overlap with one another over the next 3 years.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in the early stage of his European tour, but he's already managed to upset sentiment in Northeast Asia. He said Japan is not following Germany's track in dealing with its wartime wrongdoings. Connie Kim with this report.
Speaking to a German daily Wednesday before his trip to Frankfurt, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said his country would not follow Germany's post-war track. Answering a question posed by Frankfurter Allgemeiner Zeitung about whether Tokyo should benchmark Germany when dealing with its historical wrongs, Abe said the two situations are completely different. Since World War II, Germany has provided full compensation to neighboring countries and published textbooks that reveal the horrors that German leaders perpetrated. It's also apologized for its past wrongdoings. But Prime Minister Abe said that neighboring European unions had one common goal in mind, that being an integrated Europe. He said that is not the case for Asia. Abe added that Japan and its neighbors had already come to an agreement on compensation measures. The Prime Minister then turned his attention to the current tensions in Northeast Asia, blaming them on Japan's neighbors. He said the door to talks remains open, but that they should begin without preconditions. Abe's comments are once again raising eyebrows about Japan's sincerity to improve relations in the region. The Japanese leader criticized China for beefing up its military might, saying it would not serve to help Asia's economic development. He was responding to Chinese President Xi Jinping's remarks that criticized Abe's recent moves to the right. Prime Minister Abe left for a six-nation trip through Europe on Tuesday, where trade and security issues will dominate discussions. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
U.S. researchers have been detecting increased level of activities at North Korea's nuclear test site, but say a nuclear test is not yet imminent if the regime is sticking to its previous test practices. Satellite imagery posted on 38 North, which is a website run by the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University, shows vehicles and equipment are still outside a tunnel entrance at the Punggye site. In the past, all equipment, vehicles, and personnel were withdrawn in the days before a test. However, the website did add there is no knowing whether North Korea is changing its procedures or not. Last month, Pyongyang said it's preparing for a new form of nuclear test. Now let's talk about what else is going on in North Korea, this time in the power circle. There is a new player and he's moving up the ranks fast. It looks like Hwang Byung-seo, who made vice marshal just 2 weeks ago, has replaced yet another top-ranking official to become number 2 in the regime. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
When North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited a newly built textile mill in Pyongyang on Wednesday, he was accompanied by Hwang Byung-seo. Here, Kim ordered the military Politburo chief to congratulate the workers in celebration of May Day.
Leader Kim called for May Day to be celebrated on a grand scale and ordered the military Politburo chief to attend the event to congratulate the workers.
But Choi Ryong-hae, a long-serving hardliner in the North Korea military brass, is not seen in the photos from that day. He's also absent from the list of officials who accompanied the young leader.
The leader was accompanied by comrades Hwang Byung-seo, Park Yong-sik, and Ma Won-chun.
This has fueled speculation that Hwang may have replaced Choi as the military Politburo chief. North Korea watchers are keeping a close eye on the rapid rise of Hwang, who was promoted to the position of vice marshal less than 2 weeks after being put in the ranks of a 4-star general. Hwang reportedly led last year's purge of Chang Sung-taek, who was once the second most powerful man in North Korea. Experts say Hwang's speedy promotion may be intended to cap the power of Choi, the regime's current number 2. As for Choi, who has vanished from public sight in recent weeks, the rumors are that he has been hospitalized due to complications from diabetes and fatigue. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Washington has designated 4 countries, Cuba, Iran, Syria, and Sudan, as state sponsors of terrorism, but has once again left North Korea off the list. The last time North Korea was listed on the State Department's annual report on terrorism was back in 2008. The report says the designation is for a country that has repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism. But Washington did label the North as, quote, not cooperating fully with Washington's counter-terrorism efforts. Now, April was another solid month for Korean exporters. The trade balance has now been in the black for 27 straight months, with sectors that did not fare so well last year showing a rebound. Song Ji-yeon has a breakdown.
Korea posted a 27th consecutive monthly trade surplus in April, and more importantly, it resulted from improvement in most export industries. With the exception of LCD panels, key export items demonstrated strong growth, even steel and petroleum products, which suffered from a slump last year. Deliveries of high value-added vessels, like drill ships, helped place the shipping industry at the top in terms of export growth. Traditional export engines like semiconductors and handsets also saw an expansion thanks in part to the launch of Samsung's new Galaxy S5 model. The nation's trade surplus stood at $4.5 billion in April, with outbound shipments surpassing the $50 billion mark for the second time in history. Last month's export figure of $50.3 billion is up 9% from the same month last year, while imports rose 5% to $45.9 billion. By region, exports to U.S. rose 19% in April, another sign that the U.S. economy is recovering at a robust pace. Outbound shipments to ASEAN countries and Japan also gained ground, but slowed to European nations and China. Trade officials said, however, the large surplus in April was partly because exporters expedited shipping and customs clearances in April before the holidays in the first week of May. Looking to the month ahead, slower growth is possible due to a fewer number of working days. Song Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And here is another economic data point to get out to you, this time potentially easing concerns about deflation in the country. Korea's April Consumer Price Index rose 1.5% from a year earlier, the fastest on-year rise since August last year. The price of fresh food like agricultural and fisheries products dropped, but rising utility costs as well as home rental prices helped the gain. The data comes amid worries that the country might be entering a deflation phase as the consumer price growth has been stuck around 1% since last September. The U.S. Federal Reserve has decided to reduce its asset purchases by another $10 billion, saying growth in economic activity has picked up after a wind chill in the country. Hwang Ji-hye has more.
The Federal Reserve expressed confidence in the growth of the U.S. economy on Wednesday when it announced another cut in its bond-buying stimulus program. After a two-day policy meeting, the Fed said increasing household spending and other recent data indicate that economic activities are picking up. It said it will cut another $10 billion to $45 billion a month starting in May, despite an economic slowdown in the first quarter this year. Earlier in the day, a separate report showed that the U.S. economy grew just 0.1% in the first 3 months of this year. The Fed said the poor growth was much anticipated and that it was largely because of the harsh winter weather.
People are looking forward, and the Fed is also looking forward. Some of the more recent data on auto sales and today's Chicago Purchasing Managers survey suggests that we're getting some strength, we're getting some recovery from that really tough cold winter.
The Fed, however, did not provide any new insight into when it will start raising its near-zero interest rates, which have held steady since December 2008. The bank reiterated that it will keep the rate unchanged for a considerable amount of time after the bond purchases end. The Fed began cutting back its $85 billion monthly bond-buying stimulus in December as it cautioned about potential bubbles in assets while labor markets improved. Hwang Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The World Health Organization says growing antibiotic resistance is a quote-unquote major global threat and is calling for urgent action. Its new report says minor infections that we are able to get over now could become deadly in the future. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Global health authorities are sounding the alarm about the world's growing resistance to antibiotics, which they say could allow for a superbug to develop. A report by the UN's World Health Organization says the resistance is occurring right now and affects anyone, no matter their age or location in the world. The WHO's Assistant Director General for Health Security, T.G. Fukuda, said the world is entering into a post-antibiotic era, where minor infections and injuries that were easily treated for decades are killing again. The WHO report, which compiled data from 114 countries, said 2 key antibiotics in particular no longer work in more than half of people being treated in some countries. One of them, carbapenem, is used to treat people with life-threatening infections. The WHO is calling for urgent action to address the issue. Experts say drug resistance is driven by misuse and overuse of antibiotics, which has given bacteria a chance to build up immunity. To reverse the tide and stave off a global epidemic, experts say it will take political will and considerable investments in research and development. The WHO report also called for better hygiene, better access to clean water, and vaccinations to reduce the need for antibiotics. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And it's time for our Around the World segment. We go live to the ARIRANG News Center. Paul, let's start with Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund has announced a major bailout for the country, but of course with strings attached. What are some of the conditions attached to this deal?
Well, the IMF deal calls for the interim government in Kiev to enact major reforms to its energy and financial sectors, which includes raising taxes and the price of gas by more than 50%. In exchange, the IMF will provide $17 billion in aid for Ukraine over a period of 2 years. The decision also clears the way for an immediate injection of $3.2 billion as part of efforts to stabilize the Ukrainian economy amid the worst civil unrest in over 2 decades. Christine Lagarde, the IMF's managing director, said Ukraine needed to seize the moment.
Urgent action was necessary. Decisive measures were taken by Ukraine, and decisive measures have just been taken by the IMF. So there has been a very strong endorsement for the program, which will release over the course of the next 2 years $17.1 billion in different installments over the course of those 2 years.
Meanwhile, pro-Russian separatists remain in control of several government buildings in dozens of cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. Mediators are also holding negotiations with militants who have taken 7 military observers hostage in the pro-Russia stronghold of Slavyansk.
I see now. I heard about a botched execution in the state of Oklahoma, reigniting, of course, the debate over the death penalty. What exactly went wrong?
Well, 38-year-old Clayton Lockett was scheduled to be put to death by lethal injection on Tuesday, but doctors stopped the execution when he began convulsing and writhing in pain. He then died of a massive heart attack about 40 minutes after the procedure. Officials in Oklahoma had been testing a new combination of chemicals in its lethal injections after its previous supplier refused to sell the drugs. Human rights groups have condemned the incident as inhumane and called for a nationwide ban on capital punishment.
It's clear that many of the men who are being put to death with these new cocktails of drugs are experiencing severe pain and suffering. This not only amounts to cruel and unusual punishment under the U.S. Constitution, but it could easily amount to torture under international law.
The governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin, has ordered an independent review into the state's execution protocols. She also said that executions for other death row inmates have been delayed pending the results of the investigation.
I see now, Paul, today was, of course, the International Labor Day, and to mark the occasion, we labored really hard, and unions held marches around the country today. But what about other countries? How are they celebrating workers' rights?
Well, in Indonesia, thousands of workers took to the streets in the capital city of Jakarta on Thursday to mark Labor Day, calling on the government to raise the minimum wage. The current minimum wage varies across the country, but in larger cities it stands at about $189 per month. Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono has pledged to increase wages by 2019, but protesters say it's too little, too late.
We hope that the elected president will have a more open conscience to workers and the people of Indonesia, so there is no social inequality, and to continue the eradication of corruption.
The massive rally comes as Indonesia's main opposition named Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo as its presidential candidate. He is widely expected to become the next leader of the world's third largest democracy. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll be back with more updates in just about 2 hours.
Now let's get a check on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung, and at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, it was a beautiful day in Seoul, but how is it looking on Jindo?
Well, it's misty and visibility continues to remain relatively poor. Nevertheless, there's some relief as waves and winds continue to remain calm. Spring tides will last through Friday, so rescuers should be able to proceed with search efforts later tonight at around 9:40 p.m. when the speed of tidal currents drop to less than a kilometer per second. Shifting gears to other parts of the country, due to a high pressure system from the waters south of Jeju, we're seeing clear skies across the map. On Friday, light-passing sporadic showers of less than 5 millimeters will fall in the central regions. Otherwise, strong wind advisories have been issued in Gangwon-do province. Looking ahead at tomorrow's readings, Seoul and Busan reach 23 degrees while Gwangju tops out at 25. Taking a look at other places, Daejeon and Jeju peak at 25 degrees while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 18 and 21. Well, that's all the updates I have for you at this hour, but I'll be back with more after 10.
Thank you very much for that. That will do it for this edition. Thanks for watching, but hope you join me and my team again at 10 p.m. Korea time.